My first big leadership role, not in a professional capacity, but while I was still in college, was I was working at a restaurant and I was a server most days. And occasionally they would ask me to fill in at the hostess station. We called them greeters. And sometimes I was, taking people to their seats, and other times I was actually kind of managing that desk process. And I was managing all the greeters who would be on for any shift. And there were usually quite a few, 3, 4, 5. It was a really big restaurant. And I remember one day after having a really successful lunch crowd, and we just knocked it out of the park from managing the process, because when you ran the hostess station, you had to determine where people are going to sit, how fast would tables turn over. You had to manage that process, manage people who were waiting. And the manager came up to me and said, you did a really great job today. You were really highly efficient. And I'd love to have you manage the process tomorrow night. So I think it was for the weekend, like Friday, Saturday night. And I said, well, I'd much rather wait tables because I can obviously make more money and earn tips. And so they worked out a deal where I had a significantly higher hourly rate when I was running the hostess station. So I really warmed up to this. I was so excited, and I was always very cognizant about how the restaurant had to move and not to overwhelm my servers. And so I was constantly, saying things to the other greeters, like, please take these people to, or, actually that's probably part of the story, is I didn't really always say please, apparently. I'm giving away a little bit of the ending. But I'd say, Sally, will you take these people to table 32 and make sure that they have water? Susie, please take these people to, table 12 and go pick up their bar order for them. And so I was really always constantly moving, and I was constantly watching to make sure that we had everything flow. And I was doing great, and I was getting all these shifts, and I was actually sometimes making more money than I did because we could still get tipped out by the wait staff. And the wait staff loved me because I made sure that everything worked, flawlessly for them. So one day I came in and I was fully expecting to do this again. And I remember thinking on my way in, wow, I'm doing great at this. This is exciting. I am leading people and I'm getting results. And the manager met me at the door and said, I need to talk to you. Please come into my office. And I thought, I thought that sounded ominous, but still I wasn't, concerned about anything. And he said, yeah, I'm putting you back in waiting tables tonight. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, none of the greeters will work for you anymore. And I said, what? I was totally blown out of the water. I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, apparently you're very, very bossy and you don't take them into account. And I said, what are you talking about? Well, you're very demanding and you tell them to do this and do that and they don't like it. So I'm not going to lose any the greeters over you, so you are back into a section tonight. And I remember I was really mortified because I hadn't realized that I was doing something that was disruptive to my teammates. And I really thought that because I was executing the job so well, that was all that was important. So I learned later to talk to people and ask them. I asked them questions. When I finally got over my being mortified, I went back to them and said, can you help me explain and understand, where did I go wrong? And they shared with me, and they said, it would have been nice if you said, please take these people to table 12, and would you mind watering their table? And if you can do it, please will you go to the bar and pick up the bar orders for the server? I just assumed I was doing that, and I assumed that because I was so efficient, that everything was good. This story to me, I love sharing it because it's one of those moments where I look back and I cringe because it was really embarrassing, but it was such a great learning tool. I was able finally to actually get back to that position from time to time, and I took the feedback that the other greeters gave me, and I really implemented it, and I kept that lesson throughout my career, because I know how important it is for leaders to figure out how to make sure that they are not creating more angst for the people who work for them. Especially with new leaders, they're often really eager to prove what they can do and prove their worth and prove that to their manager or other people within the company. And in those times, they often will overwhelm and needlessly stress out their team. And what happens is that impact of that has long-term repercussions, especially for how people feel about, following you as a leader. So here's my main points on this. Number one, it's important to reflect and identify what stresses you out in your job, and to be able to write out those stressors and talk about those stressors and really identify when they happen, because typically they happen during certain cycles or when certain things trigger you. The second is to follow that reflection with maybe 3, 4, 5, however many things that you can recognize now that you do to your team or to your colleagues when you get stressed out. And really try and think about, can I be honest? Can I look at myself in the mirror and say, here is what I'm doing when I feel that stress? One great example for me of that was looking at me, and I know I've told this story so many times and it always cracks me up, that I always loved to be traveling because my time on the airplane was always so efficient for me. I have this really funny way of wanting to have my email completely empty at the end of every day, and some things build up. This is my goal. It's not my reality all the time, but I would love to get on airplanes because then I could be unplugged. I very rarely would hook up to the internet, but I would just clear out my email because it felt good to have an empty email. And I remember one time I landed in Milwaukee, and the phone rings, and one of the people that reported to me, one of my managers, says, Sherlock, you must have just gotten off an airplane. And I said, yeah, I did. Why? And he said, oh, yeah, it's par for the course. I just got 17 emails from you. And that was a moment where I realized the way that I managed my workload really might felt good to me, but it did not feel good to my team. Finally, the last key is when you know what those stressors are for you, own up to it. And in fact, be very clear with your team about your recognition of what stresses you out and how you may be impacting them. It allows you to do a couple things. When you share something like this with your team and you say, look, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't always handle stress from above very well. And there's certain things that really stress me out. And I believe when I look at this, that there are things that I'm doing to you guys, not because I want to, but because that's my, that's kind of the habit, or maybe that's just, my normal reaction. Your honesty will tell a huge story. And that honesty will gain them a great deal of faith in you. It also allows people to recognize that you are continuing to evolve and be aware, and that you're trying to model for them to have that same kind of self-awareness. And it's really important that we take a look at this and realize that how we deal with stress in our work impacts the people around us without a doubt. I can get really amped up in terms of stress with work if I allow it. And there have been definitely a couple points in my life where this has happened. A couple times it led to a real sense of burnout. And so I'm very cognizant of that now with myself as well as others. And one of the things that I noticed a couple years ago is I was starting to get really amped up again in terms of stress with what was going on with my job. And I started paying attention to it very, very closely. And as I started to identify the days that I was more stressed or less stressed, there was a definite pattern. So I had taken up a practice of mindfulness and meditation several years ago. And I realized that on the days that I meditated, I was much less stressed. And I very rarely had those feelings building up in me. I also noticed that days that I exercised, I had the same kind of better focus and much less stress, a positive energy. And then I noticed also on days when I would write in my journal, and I have a journal that I keep all the time, and it's not necessarily a bunch of random thoughts kind of journals. It's a lot of just business ideas that are coming through. And there were days that I'd always start and write the day and, and where I was, what city I was in. And I know it was really very clear that on the days that I did all three of those things, where I wrote in my journal and where I meditated and I exercised, I was hyper-focused. I was really capable of doing so much more, and my stress was almost nothing. So I went back through and I looked at myself and I said, gosh, in the last week, 3 of the days you did all three. So I'm going to go back and give myself a little gold star on those days. And then I started doing that for a couple weeks, and I would just write in gold stars. And finally I was at the store and I found some actual gold stars, and I bought them and started putting them on my calendar. And one day I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I try to do a year of having gold stars? And I was hesitant to do it where I'm trying every single day to meditate and to exercise and journal. Like, what if I miss a day? Will I get worn out? What if I'm sick? And then all of a sudden I realized I was stressing myself out over trying to plan and be perfect at something that was designed to help me be less stressed. So I finally said, don't worry about it. And I just did it. And I printed out all these calendars. I had them all over my wall in my office. And I put up star after star after star. And I completed that one full year with all but 17 days with stars on them, which was amazing. And it was such a sign of knowing about what makes me have balance and what keeps me focused, but also what keeps me in the right state of mind and frame of mind to continue to motivate my team in a positive way as well. So your assignment is to follow the very steps that I outlined in this. Number 1, identify what gives you stress in your job. Number 2, reflect on what you do, how you react to those job stressors. What are the things that you are, doing that are clear indications that your stress is taking you over? The third element was identify 3, 4, 5 things, however many things you come up with, that you can clearly say, this is what I do to my team or my colleagues when I get stressed. And 4 is own up to it. Be clear with, especially those you lead, that you identify you may be stressing them. Now, if you're not yet a leader, it's still a great exercise to know how your stress impacts those around you. So you may not have to fess up to it to your team or to, if you don't have anybody who's following you right now, but it's also a good time to reflect on how that impacts your personal life and maybe have some discussions there as well.